Welcome to the Legacy Crusaders YouTube channel. This is Benji, and this is the Ask Judgeman series, where we try to help you misplay less and win more. In this episode, we'll be discussing lingering effects, which is actually an undefined term. Almost all cards in the game have some form of lingering effect. And here's an assortment of cards you may not have realized all have something in common. True King of all Calamities, Effect Veiler, and Phantom Skyblaster. An interesting assortment of cards you would never think have something in common. We're going to get right into it, but if you haven't already, subscribe and hit the notification bell to make sure you don't miss out on our latest videos. So let's start off by defining a lingering effect. A lingering effect is any effect that applies even if a card is no longer on the field. A lingering effect actually sounds like it's the opposite of a continuous effect, a card whose effect applies while it is on the field. It's not as simple as that, as you can tell from the list of cards that were listed above. Quite a few lingering effects are actually trigger effects, although there are lingering effects that are actually continuous. So we're going to start off by talking about True King of all Calamities and Abyss Dweller, which are both very similar, and they have a lingering effect. True King of all Calamities is a rank 9 dark worm-type Xyz monster with the following effect. Once per turn during either player's turn, you can detach one Xyz material from this card and declare one attribute, which is its activation condition and cost. This turn, all face-up monsters on the field become that attribute. Also, monsters in your opponent's possession with that attribute cannot activate their effects or attack. The other effect of True King of all Calamities is actually a continuous effect and not relevant to being a lingering effect. Once this effect successfully resolves, you are unable to prevent it from continuing to affect your monsters in any way. So all monsters on the field's attribute will change, unless there's another card that overrides this by turning them into some other attribute of some sort. If you were to destroy True King of all Calamities, your monsters wouldn't all of a sudden be able to attack, and their attribute would not return to normal. The only way to prevent True King of all Calamities' lingering effect from remaining in play until the end of the turn is by negating its initial activation with a card such as Cyframe Gear Gamma or Forbidden Chalice, or even Effect Veiler if you make it to the main phase. Now, because this is an activated effect that lasts until the end of the turn, it doesn't specify that this card needs to remain on the field in order for this effect to be in play, meaning this is not a continuous effect. Now, it is an activated effect, although its activated effect actually creates an effect on the game state, so the entire game's rules change when this card successfully resolves, and there's nothing you can do to stop that other than overriding the rules with another set of rules. We'll discuss an example of overriding one set of lingering effects with another in a discussion about Droll and Lockbird versus Shared Ride. Now, Abyss Dweller is a rank 4 Sea Serpent, water, who has the following quick effect. Once per turn during either player's turn, you can detach one Xyz material from this card, all their Burning Abyss monsters, their Sanguines, and all cards that have effects that activate in the graveyard, whether they be True King, spells and traps, or anything that has an effect that activates in the graveyard, will not be able to activate because this card's lingering effect then continues until the end of the turn. Now, not all lingering effects proceed until the end of the turn, but most of them do. Let's have a discussion of a few types of cards that actually continue beyond a single turn. Scapegoat is a quick play spell card. It reads as follows. Special summon 4 sheep tokens, which are Beast Earth level 1, 0 attack, 0 defense monsters. In defense position, they cannot be tributed for the tribute summon. You cannot special summon other monsters the turn you activate this card, but you can normal set. So Scapegoat is a lingering effect, as the card has already successfully resolved and gone to the graveyard, as the tokens continue to sit on the field until they would be destroyed or used for link summons or something of that nature. The reason this is a lingering effect is because there's no way to cancel out or negate the activation of this effect or remove this effect without actually removing the cards from the field. This card is already successfully resolved, and that's already changed the rules of the game. It says that there are tokens on the field. Tokens pretty much are always a lingering effect. The card that produced the tokens is an effect that's lingering, and that's why the tokens exist, because they're not actual cards. They exist as a result of the effect of another card. Similarly, Phantom Skyblaster produces tokens, and even if Phantom Skyblaster were destroyed, you would not suddenly lose the tokens that are summoned by Phantom Skyblaster. Now, I mentioned that you can actually counteract one lingering effect with that of another card. So if we were to activate a card such as Shared Ride, every time your opponent adds a card from your deck to their hand, you get to draw a card. But if your opponent would then activate Droll and Lockbird, which says that neither player can add cards from their deck to the hand, the rules apply over Shared Ride. So Shared Ride's lingering effect is still in play, but the wording of Droll and Lockbird is actually stronger than that of Shared Ride, because not being able to do something overrides doing something instead or doing something in addition. So certain lingering effects are actually stronger than others, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a lingering effect that overpowers another lingering effect. For example, Different Dimension Ground is a lingering effect. It's a card that reads that all cards that are sent to the graveyard this turn are banished instead. But if Imperial Ironwall, which is a continuous trap card, were to be face up on the field after this is resolved, cards cannot be banished, and cannot is a stronger form of change the rules than instead. So in this case, we're actually canceling out a lingering effect, not by negating the activation of the card initially, like we would with True King of all Calamities or Abyss Dweller. We're actually preventing one effect by using an effect that says you can't use that effect, or that effect no longer applies. Now there are two more things I want to discuss. One is Effect Veiler, and the secondary thing I want to discuss is a lingering effect that actually is not a result of an activated effect, because so far all the lingering effects that I've mentioned have been activated effects in some manner, but there are some lingering effects that don't activate at all. Their conditions have to be met in some other manner. For example, we have Symphonic Warrior Mike's, who is a pendulum monster, Machine Wind, with the following effect. After you normal or special summon this card, you can normal summon one monster during your main phase this turn in addition to your normal summon or set. You can only gain this effect once per turn. Now this effect is actually continuous. You can tell because there's no colon on the card text leading up to the part that says you can perform an additional normal summon. Therefore it must be a continuous effect. And because it says during the after this card is normal or special summoned, meaning if it's normal or special summon is successful, whether or not you should negate its effect at any point, that effect cannot be removed. This card has already successfully made its condition for its lingering effect to apply. Now, this is one of a few cards that have these kinds of effects, such as Constellar Pollux, or there's an Evil Swarm as well that has a similar effect. If a card was normal summoned this turn, you can perform an additional normal summon. You can't undo those lingering effects except by performing an action that prevents these conditions from ever being met, such as preventing Mikes from making it to the field by normal or special summon, whether it be using a card like Solemn Warning, or perhaps a Ghost Ogre on a Symphonic Warrior Guitar is preventing it from actually making it to the field altogether. So that would be another way to counteract the lingering effect. And Symphonic Warrior Mike's continuous effect is actually different from that of Gem Knight Seraph Knight, which just says you can perform an additional normal summon this turn. Seraph Knight's effect is continuous, meaning it has to remain on the field. Now, I know I said Symphonic Warrior Mike's effect was also continuous, but Mike's actually says during the turn that this card was normal summoned or special summoned, so it doesn't really matter if it stays on the field, because it was normal or special summoned. Unlike Seraph Knight, which doesn't say if this card is fusion summoned or if this card is special summoned, it specifically says you can perform an additional normal summon, which implies that it's continuous, implying it needs to remain on the field in order to be successful. And there was an additional question asked on the community tab in reference to this video, which is about stacking effects of additional normal summons. Both of these cards say you can only gain this effect once per turn, which means you can only gain an additional normal summon once per turn. So cards that have this exact text, this exact requirement at the end of it, you can only do this once, or you can only gain this effect once, are all the same normal summon. So Seraph Knight, Eidos, the Squire, the Monarch Squire, and Symphonic Warrior Mike's all have the same exact additional normal summon, and you can't overlay them and have an additional stack. Although there are other cards that give you additional normal summon, such as Double Summon, which is also a lingering effect. After it's resolved, you can't suddenly not have a normal summon unless another card prevents you from doing that, such as Summon Limit, which would restrict your summons to 2, but those summons don't stack. So Symphonic Warrior Mike's, Gem Knight Seraph Knight, and Eidos, the Underworld Squire, actually don't stack because they all are the same effect, and you can only gain that effect once in a turn. And we're going to finish up this video by talking about Effect Veiler, or any kind of generic effect negation that affects one monster until the end of the turn. I've done an entire video on generic effect negation. Effect Veiler, Infinite Impermanence, and Forbidden Chalice all have a lingering effect. Once they've successfully resolved after targeting a monster, until the end of the turn, all of that monster's effects on the field are negated. That includes its continuous effects. Not necessarily a lingering effect if it's already resolved successfully, such as True King of all Calamities, but its effects that would activate on the field, or its continuous effects on the field at this point, would be negated. Although, there are some cards that people always had some issues with, and they weren't really sure how this worked. An example is Rescue Rabbit. If you Effect Veiler Rescue Rabbit, would you be able to trigger its effect? The answer is yes, it would banish itself as cost, but because its effect activated on the field, and it was negated while it was on the field, you would not be able to resolve the effect and summon your normal monsters from your deck. Now, a different card that you could Effect Veiler and it still resolves successfully is Sangin, and Sangin says when this card is sent to the graveyard, meaning it triggers in the graveyard, meaning it's not the same card anymore. So when a card travels from the field to the graveyard or the field to the hand, its new location means it's a different card, and if its trigger is met in the new location, it's no longer affected by a card like Effect Veiler, which continues working until the end of the turn. So that's going to kind of wrap up our discussion of lingering effects in Yugioh. If you have more specific questions, you can leave them down in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.